Hi, this is Annie Grace, and I'm the author of The Snake in Mind. Today I'm answering readers' questions, and I got a great question from Tess. Tess writes in and she says, "Hi, Annie. Thank you so much for the alcohol experiment. I've just completed it and also read your book, and I've just purchased your 100 Days of Lasting Change. It's all great. Thank you so much. You're changing lives." My question is, how do you deal with times when you still feel angry or emotional even though you're alcohol-free? How do you talk to yourself in these situations where previously you might have resorted to a drink? I don't want to drink, by the way. I just get frustrated that I still feel really annoyed sometimes. So, Tess, this is such a good question. And I think sometimes we have this false idea that once we stop drinking alcohol, everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows. And I think that a lot comes from because we see so many people posting about how much better life truly is. And life truly is significantly better. You know, your joy comes back neurochemically, your brain rebalances, you start to experience things, you know, excitement and hope and good feelings that you haven't experienced since you were really a kid, since before you started drinking and numbing your brain to begin with. Because again, you cannot numb selectively. If you numb pain, you're numbing pleasure. And so all those things come back. And so you see all these posts all over the internet about how life is just like amazing. And then we forget that it's still life. And I think the number one thing to do in this situation is just to realize and accept that you will have times of frustration, times of anger, times of emotion, times of sadness, times of tears, times when things don't feel great. And I think just by accepting that and putting a reasonable expectation that every day will not be an incredible day. It just won't. Life is ups and downs and roller coasters, and it just has all sorts of bumps along the way. And so just because you don't drink anymore, yes, I think life is much better. I know my life is much better. I know my happiness level, where it was like this before, is like this now. But the thing is it's still going up and down. Even though overall my baseline has significantly raised, it still goes up and down. I still have really bad days. I still have times where I cry a lot. I still have times where I can't get out of a funk. I still have times where I just don't even want to get out of bed or face the day or do anything. And that's just part of life. So number one, I would say absolutely accepting that that is normal and that it's part of life. And it doesn't mean that anything's wrong. It just is how we human beings have been made and created. I think that is 99% of the battle there. And I think then also, you know, really tactically, things that you can do to deal with it is, I heard this great quote once, and it was that emotions are basically manifest of thoughts. And so they can be conscious thoughts or unconscious thoughts. And you know consciously what you're thinking because you can hear your voice in your head. But sometimes unconsciously, you don't know what fear or apprehension is lurking there. And in order to get really clear with what you're thinking, I think the best thing that I can say that has really worked for me is that when I start to feel negative, when I start to feel an emotion, I do a few things. I stop, and number one, I accept it. I say, okay. And I observe it. What am I feeling? How does it feel? Is it a pit in my stomach? Is it a tightness in my chest? Are my shoulders hunched and are my teeth clenched? What am I feeling? And I just really stop and observe that emotion. And that does this incredible thing of it breaks your identification with it. Because so often what happens is we feel an emotion, and then because we feel our emotion, it could be from deep unconscious thoughts that all of a sudden we feel this emotion. Something's triggered this feeling of fear in us or uncertainty or unease, something maybe from decades in our past. All of a sudden we're feeling this emotion. The mind almost instantly starts to justify why that emotion is being felt. And so the mind with its conscious thoughts gets in there and says, oh, you're feeling upset. There must be something wrong. I have to make sense of this feeling of being upset. So I'm going to start this really rapid litany of everything that could possibly be wrong in your life so that all of a sudden you can grasp onto the one that it is. Well, the thing is that often nothing is wrong. It's just that there's something that triggered us unconsciously and there's something that we felt. And so if you stop and you just really observe the emotion and say, okay, what does that feel like? It breaks identification with it, and it doesn't allow your mind to go on this trajectory of trying to justify the feeling. Because as soon as you start to justify the feeling, you get really entrenched and enmeshed with that emotion. And all of a sudden, your thoughts about the emotion start to feed that emotion. And that emotion grows and gets worse. And that's, I used to find myself in funks for like weeks, right? Now I can do that too. Like I can wake up feeling really bad and my mind can start to justify it. But usually within hours, sometimes a day or two, I can pull myself back out of it because I can say, wait a second. nothing really is truly wrong right now. Let me just observe what's going on. And then once you start to observe, you start to listen to what you're thinking. And honestly, if you just stop and be quiet and listen and observe, you start to see that there's some sort of fear or thinking that is just not entirely nice, perhaps. Often we talk to ourselves in our own head in a far meaner tone of voice and with far worse things to say than we would ever talk to a stranger, much less somebody we love. So what I recommend is actually taking a pen and paper, like carry it around with you. And if you start to feel really upset, write down what you just said to yourself in your head. Write down what you've been saying to yourself in your head, and then ask yourself, would I say this to a stranger? Would I say this to somebody I loved? And then get really, really serious about talking to yourself respectfully, talking to yourself nicely, accepting what you're really feeling instead of beating yourself up for it. I know for me, when I used to start feeling sad, for some reason I've gotten this idea that sadness was a weakness. So if I'd start feeling sad, the inner dialogue would go like this, like, oh my gosh, Annie, like really, your life is fine. Like you've got everything, like you're so blessed in so many ways. How in the world could you possibly be feeling sad? I can't believe you're feeling sad. God, what's wrong with you? Why are you always sad? Are you just this, like, and I go and I go and I go. And now the sadness is combined with me beating myself up for feeling sad. And maybe that rings a bell for you. But just simply stopping and really getting back in control of how you're talking to yourself can be an absolute game changer. And then Tess, I see you said you just got the 100 days of lasting change. That 100 days, every single day, it's like literally packed with tactics that will help you live a life completely free of self-medication. And so that is going to give you far more answers than I have time for in a Facebook Live. But I will tell you that number one is just absolutely accepting that your feelings are totally okay. And that just because you're now alcohol free does not mean you won't have bad times. I think your baseline of happiness raises. I've seen this over and over thousands and thousands of times now. Baseline of happiness raises, but it's still an up and down thing because that is the definition of the human experience. So thank you so much for the question. It's absolutely wonderful question, such a good one, such an honor to answer it. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.